Before we get into today's show, let me tell you about the latest deal from Mike Lindell, MyPillow. Once again, the big box stores have canceled their orders simply because they don't agree with Mike Lindell's politics. They don't like it because he supports President Trump. Well, he's going to pass that savings on to you. No more middleman. And boy, does he have some great deals on the Giza Dream sheets and the Percal bed sheets. Listen to this. Giza Dream queen size, normally $139.98. Your wholesale price, $69.99 when you use promo code Joey. King size, only $79.99. The Percal queen size, normally $89.98. Your wholesale price, $29.98 when you use promo code Joey. Just call 1-800-893-4059 or go to MyPillow.com. Always use promo code Joey. Free shipping options available. This allotment's not going to last very long. When they're gone, they're gone. MyPillow.com, promo code Joey. Thanks for joining me in the PhD Weight Loss and Nutrition Studios. To lose weight for the last time, visit myphdweightloss.com. Welcome in. Here's what we're going to cover today. President Trump says the war with Iran is far ahead of schedule in an update yesterday, saying that Operation Epic Fury has been a complete success so far. An Obama-appointed federal judge, his attempt to rein in immigration enforcement in Chicago has backfired after a federal appeals court ruled she overstepped her authority and effectively established the district court as the supervisor of all executive branch activity in the city of Chicago. The wife of a Georgia high school teacher who died after what authorities described as a late-night senior prank gone wrong has asked for all charges to be dropped against the students involved. And South Carolina GOP Chairman Drew McKissick joins us to talk about the latest on closing primaries in South Carolina and filing for candidates opens in just 6 days.
I told you we'd be back.
And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free.
It's Joey Hudson.
I wanted to name it the Joey Hudson bill, but, you know, they don't allow you to put names on bills. But I wanted to call it the Joey Hudson bill because I know that one's been near and dear to you for a number of years.
That's how it's done. Let your voice be heard.
And the truth shall set you free.
Here's Joey Hudson.
President Trump declared the war with Iran is very complete and, quote, far ahead of schedule, as he also considers taking control of the Strait of Hormuz, the trade route that's under siege by the Islamic Republic and is causing chaos in the global oil market. President Trump hailed Operation Epic Fury as a success yesterday, suggesting that his previous prediction of a multi-week war may not be necessary. He told CBS News, I think the war is very complete, pretty much. Iran has no navy, no communications. They've got no air force. Their missiles are down to a scatter, he added. If you look, they have nothing left. There's nothing left in a military sense. The president talked about how he intends to complete the job so another president after him doesn't have to deal with Iran. And he made it clear this is why he thinks we need input on who their leader should be.
We don't want another president that maybe wouldn't be willing to do what I'm willing to do for the good of the world, for the good of our nation, to be stuck with the situation in 5 years or 10 years from now. So we think they should put a president in or the head of the country in that's going to be able to do something peacefully for a change. They've been doing this for 47 years, killing people for 47 years, whether it's the barracks or even the SS Cole where they were involved. Very strongly, they always denied it. But where they were very strongly involved in all of the people that died through the roadside bombs, died and are right now walking around with no legs, no arms, a face that's been so badly damaged.
And the president went on to point out that the Iranians could not be trusted. They'd been given plenty opportunity. He reminded everyone that Iran has not been truthful about building nuclear weapons and suggested that had we not intervened now, Israel would have eventually been totally destroyed.
The Iranian regime has been attacking Americans and spreading terror for 47 years, and despite these countless opportunities to renounce their nuclear ambitions, which they had just a short while ago, they told Mr. Witkoff, who is standing right over here, they said, they actually said, we want to keep building. Essentially, in a real nutshell, we want to continue to build nuclear weapons. If we didn't knock out Midnight Hammer, if we didn't knock out their Iranian potential, if we didn't do that with Midnight Hammer, they would have had a nuclear weapon. They would have used it long before now. and at a minimum, Israel would have been annihilated.
And then President Trump went into further detail about how Iran had started the process of digging deeper bunkers. We've had heard military analysis of this, saying that their idea was to go as deep as they possibly could so that our bunker bombs could not reach them. He said that the purpose of building those deep bunkers was to protect their nuclear weapons so that the world would not know what they were doing.
Even after we obliterated their key nuclear sites in Operation Midnight Hammer, they never negotiated in good faith. They still continued to say, we want to build nuclear, we want enrichment at levels that were unacceptable. And they even turned down an offer for unlimited free nuclear fuel forever for civilian purposes. We had people offering them free nuclear fuel. They weren't interested in that because they wanted to build a nuclear weapon. So instead, the regime was trying to reconstitute its weapons program at a different site. They couldn't go back to where they were, the 3 sites that we obliterated, but they were starting work at another site, a different site, different kind of a site, and that was protected by granite. They wanted it protected. Granite's pretty good, but they wanted it protected by a lot deeper. They wanted to go a lot deeper, and they started the process while rapidly building conventional ballistic missiles. They were going to do it all at the same time that threatened our overseas bases and soon could have reached even our homeland.
Which, of course, is a very scary thought. Now, what does all this mean? One of the things that happens during these international crises is that political language starts flying around. And sometimes it's not immediately clear what leaders actually mean. And that's exactly where we are right now, I think, when it comes to Iran. Over the past several days, President Trump has been using some very strong language when talking about Iran. He's mentioned unconditional surrender. He said the next supreme leader of Iran may not last very long. And, of course, we know this past weekend they named that. They named the Ayatollah's son as their supreme leader after knowing that the Western world did not want him in that place. So is the United States talking about another regime change? Is this potentially another Iraq? Are we about to see America try to rebuild another country in the Middle East? Well, if you listen carefully to what the administration appears to be signaling, the answer may actually be something much simpler. And this is what I believe. The goal isn't to rebuild Iran. The goal is to, let's just say, normalize Iran. In other words, make Iran behave like a normal country, one that the world doesn't have to fear. And think about that for a moment. For more than 4 decades now, Iran has been governed by a revolutionary Islamist regime that came to power in 1979 after the overthrow of the Shah. That revolution fundamentally reshaped the country. Iran went from being a complicated but functioning state in the international system to becoming the world's leading sponsor of terrorism. Iran was a threat to the entire world. The regime funded Hezbollah in Lebanon. It's armed militias across Iraq and Syria. It backed Hamas. It helped the Houthis disrupt global shipping lanes. If anything bad was going on in the world, you could almost bet that Iran had their hands in it. And along the way, Iran's leadership, of course, has pursued nuclear weapons to have that capability, built long-range missile programs. They repeatedly call for the destruction of Israel. At the same time, the Iranian people themselves have paid the price. Decades of sanctions, economic stagnation, political repression, a government that spends billions exporting revolution while ordinary citizens struggle with inflation and unemployment back home. So when you hear President Trump talk about unconditional surrender, it may not mean what people assume. It doesn't necessarily mean American troops marching into Tehran. Instead, the message appears to be Iran's leadership must abandon the revolutionary project. They must understand that they have to get along. They have to no longer be a threat to the world. Stop pursuing nuclear weapons. Stop sponsoring global terror networks. Stop trying to dominate the Middle East through proxy wars. Stop threatening the United States and our allies. That's the baseline. And how Iran reaches that point is something the Iranian people and the power centers within their country would ultimately have to figure out themselves. We can't make them do it. And that's a very different model from what we saw in the early 2000s. The New York Post wrote in an editorial board column, under President George W. Bush, the U.S. invaded Iraq, removed Saddam Hussein, and then attempted to rebuild the Iraqi state from the ground up. Nation building became the central mission, the Post wrote. Billions of dollars, years of military presence, and enormous political and human cost. Then the Post goes on to write about, under President Obama, we saw something different in Libya. The United States helped topple Muammar Gaddafi, but without any serious plan for what came next. The result, a power vacuum, militia warfare, years of instability in that region. Neither of those models is what the current strategy toward Iran appears to be aiming for, according to some of the analysts who know more about this than I do. Instead, they say what's unfolding looks more like pressure, sustained and overwhelming pressure designed to weaken the ruling clique that currently controls the country and has controlled it all these decades. American forces targeting military infrastructure, missile factories, drone production, naval assets, command and control networks tied to the Revolutionary Guard. Because the Iranian people are not a threat to us. It's the ruling class and the military who is a threat to us. And they're the ones that we have to get out of there. The goal isn't occupation, I don't think. The goal is to strip the regime of its ability to project power and to harm other parts of the Middle East, and especially who could potentially harm the United States. And that's what we just have to guard against, no matter what it costs us. GOP shots like Ozempic are everywhere right now, but here's the question. What happens when you stop? If you don't fix the reason your body gained weight in the first place, the weight comes back. Joey Hudson here at PhD Weight Loss. They don't just treat the weight as the problem. They treat it as a symptom of metabolic dysfunction, hormone imbalance, or inflammation. If you don't correct those, no shot or hack will ever last. PhD looks at you holistically to improve your health span, your energy, and your longevity, because losing weight is one thing, but keeping it off for life is another. Right now, when you call PhD Weight Loss and mention Joey Hudson, you'll receive 2 free weeks in the program, and they'll cover the cost of your food. That's real results with zero guesswork. Again, mention Joey Hudson when you call 864-644-1900. That's 864-644-1900. Visit them online at myphdweightloss.com. Stop chasing weight. Start fixing what actually is causing it. Call today. Be sure and tell them Joey Hudson sent you. Get you 2 free weeks in the program. 864-644-1900. Have you been following the story out of Georgia, the Georgia high school teacher who was tragically killed in an accident? The wife of the teacher, and he died, and after what authorities described as a late-night senior prank gone wrong, his wife has asked for all charges to be dropped against the students involved. So here's the story. 5 North Hall High School students were arrested after going to math teacher Jason Hughes' Gainesville, Georgia home armed with toilet paper to carry out a long-standing prank that was a tradition for the juniors and seniors at this high school. Mr. Hughes was 40 years old. He was the intended target last Thursday night. And as the group tried to leave in 2 separate vehicles, Hughes was walking toward the street when he tripped and fell into a slippery roadway. The Hall County Sheriff's Office said that it was raining, it was wet, he slipped. Unfortunately, as he slipped and fell, he was then run over by a car driven by one of the students, 18-year-old Jaden Ryan Wallace. It was an accident. Rather than an angry confrontation, this father was, according to his wife, excited and waiting to catch them in the act because he knew they were coming. It was a senior tradition. This was a 40-year-old playful teacher, very popular teacher, we're told, who wanted to kind of get involved in the act. His wife told the New York Times, quote, "This is a terrible tragedy, and our family is determined to prevent a separate tragedy from occurring, ruining the lives of these students." She went on to say this would be counter to Jason's lifelong dedication of investing in the lives of these children. What an attitude to have. She's just lost her husband. She has young children. They had a whole life ahead of them, and he died in this tragic accident. According to the story, the Hugheses were both teachers at this public high school, and they had devoted their lives to teaching. The New York Post said the prank had evolved into an ongoing battle where students lost points if the teacher caught them in the act. So the idea, and look, a lot of high school kids do this. You may have even done it yourself. You know, you go to a friend or a teacher or the principals or even the school itself armed with toilet paper, and you throw the rolls up and you just keep throwing them up and lapping them into the trees. According to the story, this young Jaden Wallace, he's 18 years old, so they're treating him like an adult. After he realized what had happened, because he was driving one of the two vehicles, he and the other teen stopped and attempted to help their teacher as they waited for first responders to arrive. We're told that they were trying to treat. One report said that they were performing CPR. Unfortunately, the teacher later died from his injuries after arriving at the hospital. This young man faces felony charges of first-degree vehicular homicide and reckless driving, along with misdemeanor charges of criminal trespass and littering on private property. Now, the other 18-year-olds identified by police are Elijah Owens, Aiden Hucks, Anna Luke, and Ariana Cruz. They also were arrested at the scene and also were charged with misdemeanor criminal trespass and littering on private property. Jail records show that Mr. Wallace was arrested on Saturday and has a total bond of $1,950. All 5 students have since been released on bond, according to authorities. Fox News says that they've reached out to the Hall County Sheriff's Office for comment on Laura Hughes' statement. So far, the Sheriff's Office has not commented. Along with being a math teacher at the high school, the school's Fellowship of Christian Athletes posted on its Facebook that Mr. Hughes was also a golf coach at the school. In a statement to Fox, the school said, "Our hearts are broken. Jason Hughes was a loving husband, a devoted father, a passionate teacher, mentor, and coach who has loved and respected, or was loved and respected by students and colleagues. He gave so much to so many in numerous ways. Our hearts and prayers go out to his wife and family. We ask that the media and the public respect their privacy as they grieve." And a GoFundMe, a family friend asked for funds to help with future planning for his 2 children, saying Jason's life was a blessing to so many, and his untimely passing will be indescribably difficult for his wife and 2 young boys for years to come. And yes, it will be. Yes, it will be. What a horrible, horrible tragedy. But, you know, I love the attitude of his wife, because it was a prank. And as she describes, the teacher, Jason, was excited about the idea that his students were going to come roll his yard. He thought it was funny. I hope they're able to reconcile this. Those kids will live with this for the rest of their lives as well. So spending time in jail is not going to change that. You know, moving on, one of the ongoing tensions in American government is the balance of power between the 3 branches: the executive branch that enforces the law, the legislative branch that writes the law, and the judicial branch that interprets the law. Every now and then, that balance gets tested. And this past weekend, we saw a pretty dramatic example of that playing out in federal court involving immigration enforcement in the city of Chicago. And look, Chicago has been at the center of the immigration chaos. So a federal appeals court has just thrown out a sweeping ruling from a lower court judge who tried to restrict immigration enforcement operations during a major federal crackdown on illegal immigration and street crime. You may remember this. We talked about it several weeks, actually maybe a couple of months now back. The ruling that got tossed came from the U.S. District Judge Sarah Ellis, who was appointed by former President Barack Obama. Judge Ellis had issued a very broad injunction against the Department of Homeland Security and the Justice Department during an immigration enforcement operation called Operation Midway Blitz. Now, that operation was launched last year by the Trump administration to target illegal immigration networks and criminal activity in and around Chicago. During that effort, there were protests. Remember some of the confrontations where, like in some of the other cities, they literally tried to barricade and block the ICE agents into streets and not allow them to move around? These confrontations between demonstrations of federal agents, eventually lawsuits from protest groups and journalists were filed. Judge Ellis responded with a 233-page ruling at the time that essentially placed new restrictions on how federal agents could operate. We knew at the time she was overreaching. We just had to let it play out in the courts. She said the order simply required federal officers to follow existing DHS policies. Things like rules about the use of force and body cameras. But the appeals court saw it a little bit differently, actually very differently. In fact, the language from the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Seventh Circuit was unusually blunt. A 3-judge panel ruled that Judge Ellis had overstepped her authority and issued an injunction that was far too sweeping. The court said the order was overbroad and constitutionally suspect. And the judges didn't mince words about why. They said that the lower court had essentially tried to make itself the supervisor of the entire executive branch in Chicago. Now think about that. The appeals court said the injunction didn't just apply to a few officers involved in a specific incident. Instead, the way it was written, it applied to the entire Department of Homeland Security and Justice, along with anyone acting with them. In other words, the order effectively put a federal judge in charge of overseeing how immigration enforcement works in one of the largest cities in America. The appeals court said that crosses a constitutional line. Their opinion said very clearly, federal courts do not exercise general oversight of the executive branch. I hope some of the other federal judges around the country have read this order and recognize what they're doing, because we've seen this over and over and over. The panel said the district court likely abused its discretion by issuing such a sweeping order. They also pointed out something else that kind of raised some eyebrows. Judge Ellis's injunction required federal law enforcement agencies to submit all current and future internal policies and guidance for judicial review. Talk about overreaching her authority. The appeals court said that level of control would force the executive branch to run its operational decisions through the judiciary. We all know that's a no-no, don't we? They said that violates the separation of powers. Now, here's where the story gets even more interesting. By the time the appeals court ruled, the plaintiffs themselves, the protest groups and journalists, had already asked to dismiss the lawsuit. They didn't want to continue. They said Operation Midway Blitz had largely ended. Normally, that might have been the end of it, but the appeals court decided it was still important to rule on the injunction anyway, hopefully to send a message to some of these other activist judges. Let's hope it works. You know, we're not hearing a whole lot about the partial government shutdown, but it's still there. There's still some federal agencies that are within the Department of Homeland Security, of course, who are being affected. So let me ask you a question. If you're headed to the airport for, say, a spring break trip, maybe your kids are out for spring break or they're about to be in the next coming weeks, and someone told you that TSA might be there might be a line, maybe 3 hours just to get through security, would you still go? So let's talk about something that millions of Americans are dealing with and starting to get worse now as spring break travel ramps up across the country. It's not the weather. It's not the airlines. It's not mechanical delays. It's security lines, according to reports from airports across the country. Massive, hours-long security lines at major airports across the U.S. And officials say the problem is being driven by the ongoing funding lapse at the Department of Homeland Security. Now, if you traveled this weekend or you know someone who did, you may have already heard about this to a degree. At Houston's Hobby Airport, passengers reported security lines stretching 3.5 hours at one point on Sunday as they were trying to get back home. 3.5 hours just to get through security. How do you know to prepare for this? I mean, the rule of thumb basically is you get there a couple hours ahead of time. Look, in my case, at GSP, I get there maybe about an hour ahead of time. So did a lot of people miss their flights because they got there not knowing they're going to have to wait hours? In New Orleans, airport officials were warning travelers to arrive at least 3 hours before their flights just to make sure they could clear TSA in time. And we're not talking about a little congestion here. Passengers described lines wrapping through the terminals, in some cases snaking out the security checkpoints, running through baggage claims areas, in some cases even stretching out towards parking garages. Now imagine showing up at the airport, again, thinking you have plenty of time, and then realizing the security line looks like a line for a rock concert, camping out to get the best seats. And here's the bigger story behind all this. Officials at the Department of Homeland Security say the problem is tied directly to the current shutdown and funding dispute in Washington. We kind of saw this coming, didn't we? And the longer the Democrats push this out, the worse this is going to become. Lauren Biss, who serves as Deputy Assistant Secretary for Public Affairs at DHS, said the delays are what she called the severe fallout from the political standoff. According to DHS, the funding lapse means TSA officers are currently working without pay. We saw this happen before in the other shutdown. You know, they'll do this for a while, but they have to pay their bills. And they'll start finding other work to do and not showing up. The men and women responsible for protecting our skies in a very, this is a very crucial time right now. We're still waiting on the other shoe to drop. If there are Iranian terror cells within the U.S., this would be the perfect time, wouldn't it? But here, these are the men and women responsible for screening passengers, checking luggage, stopping weapons from getting on the airplanes. They're now being asked to continue showing up for work without a paycheck. Earlier this month, many of them reportedly received partial paychecks, but now they're facing something even worse, the first full missed paycheck. And as you can imagine, when people aren't getting paid, real life starts to catch up pretty quickly because they still have to pay their bills. Rent still has to be paid as well. Their gas bill, their electric bill, water bills, their grocery bills. And when thousands of federal employees suddenly find themselves working without pay, it can lead to something we've already started seeing, staffing shortages. Because, again, they've had to find other jobs so they can pay the bill. According to TSA officials, some employees simply can't afford to keep showing up indefinitely without income. Who can blame them? And when the staffing drops, even just a little, it can have a huge impact on airport operations, according to the airport directors. Security checkpoints require a specific number of trained officers to operate efficiently. If you suddenly have fewer officers working those checkpoints, the lines get longer. It gets slower and slower. The lines then get longer and longer, which is exactly what travelers are seeing right now. Now, the airline industry is starting to raise concerns as well. Airlines for America, the trade association that represents the nation's largest carriers, says that these delays are already leading to missed flights and delayed departures. Their CEO, Chris Sununu, issued a statement urging Washington to act quickly. He said America's transportation security workforce is simply too important to be used as political leverage, and that's what Chucky Schumer and the Democrats are doing. Hakeem Jeffries, that's what he's doing. And from a practical standpoint, there's another issue that makes this situation even more complicated. Training a TSA officer isn't something you can do overnight. So it's not like you can go out and just hire some people overnight to fill these positions. We're told it takes typically 4 to 6 months to fully train a new officer before they can work independently at a checkpoint. So if the agency starts losing workers because they take other jobs, it's not like they can simply replace them tomorrow. There's a long pipeline required to bring new people on board, and that timing is especially important because the U.S. is about to face one of the biggest travel events in recent history. The World Cup is now less than 100 days away. That event is expected to bring millions of international visitors through American airports. It could be a disaster. And if staffing shortages continues to grow between now and then, airport security could become a real pressure point. Now, to be clear, TSA says they're doing everything they can to keep operations moving, and I trust that they are. A TSA spokesperson told media that as the staffing constraints arise, the agency will evaluate the situation case by case and adjust operations where possible. But again, if you don't have the people, there are not a lot of adjustments you can make. But this is giving travelers right now a chance to pause. And again, if you're going somewhere, arrive as early as possible. Check with your local airport. 3 hours early may not be a bad idea in some of these larger airports right now, according to these reports. One traveler in New Orleans told reporters she saw security lines stretching all the way through the terminal and even out toward a nearby parking lot. Now, we're not getting these types of reports in the upstate of South Carolina at my home airport of GSP, but still check. And if you're traveling out of GSP, but when you're returning, check with that airport too. Don't miss your flight. This lady's flight had already been delayed, which ended up helping her, but she admitted that if it left on time, she would have missed it. And that's the reality travelers are facing at the moment. Airports are busy. Spring break travel is ramping up. This is not a time to be having problems staffing TSA. I hope Congress gets this fixed and quickly. Your comments are welcome on the Furman Ford text line, 864-477-JOEY. That's 864-477-5639. Emails always welcome, joey@joeyhudson.com. Speaking of the Furman Ford text line, it's never been more important to support locally run businesses owned by people who actually live here in the upstate. Let me take a minute to talk with you about our friends at Furman Ford. If you're looking for a new vehicle, maybe a great pre-owned vehicle, one you can trust, or maybe you're looking to order that special vehicle. Either way, if you want a new one, a brand new one, or a pre-owned that you can trust, the folks at Furman Ford, they're there to help you. Their name is on the sign because their name is on the line, because every single transaction is important to them. Jim Furman, Matthew Furman. They do business the right way. When you stop by, when you give them a call, or maybe when you just send them a quick email, you're always going to have access to a member of the Furman Ford family. And by the way, they also offer great service, and you're not going to have to wait weeks and weeks to get it done. And you do not have had to purchase your vehicle at Furman Ford. Doesn't even have to be a Ford. They service all makes and models. Visit my friends at Furman Ford online at furmanford.com, furmanford.com. On our guest line, Drew McKissick, chairman of the South Carolina Republican Party. Welcome. How are you?
I'm doing well this morning. How are you, sir?
I am wonderful. Before we get into a couple of issues, Friday was a memorial service for Jesse Jackson. And we had President Clinton, President Obama, President Biden all spoke, although I'm not really sure what President Biden said. He got a little confused again, so imagine that. But now Jesse Jackson Jr. says that none of the three really knew his dad. He's not happy with the messages they delivered. Does that surprise you?
No, it doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me that, it will be a little bit more of an overt, partisan message, or try to take advantage of the occasion for potential partisan benefit. And I mean, you've watched over the decades here where we're increasingly getting a political party that is totally built around, racial grievance and trying to instigate racial grievance. It's a major part of the structure of the Democrat Party. To have politicians who would try to trade on that at a funeral, doesn't surprise me. I don't think it should really surprise anyone. Again, it's a funeral. Do you really need to bring that kind of stuff into it? But, it's what they do.
Yep. We'll get on to issues here. Over the weekend, President Trump made it pretty clear that he's going to turn up the pressure on the U.S. Senate. He wrote on Truth Social that he's going to refuse to sign any legislation until the Senate passes the Save America Act. Now, what do you think? Do Republicans go for the talking filibuster, like sort of been talked about a bit?
Yeah, I don't want to make a prediction because I think it's going to be really tight. I mean, in my opinion, filibuster should be a filibuster.
Right.
I mean, that's what it was for hundreds of years, or close to hundreds of years of our nation's history. I think up until the early 1970s, when they came up with, I think, what they referred to as a gentleman's filibuster, which used to be, it was a 2/3 vote that was required to essentially invoke cloture, to overcome a filibuster, to sit people down who were trying to talk a bill to death. It was a high standard, 2/3. What they did was they lowered it down to 60% or 60 votes and made the filibuster easier to do, which basically, the minority or whoever's in the minority comes up and the majority says, we're going to filibuster this. They go, oh, okay, all right. So then they move on to some other business. And it was their way, they thought, to make it easier to get other business transacted while a, quote, filibuster was taking place behind the scenes. Well, obviously that begins to get abused because it's too easy. So pretty much at that point, everything began to get filibustered. So in my opinion, I think you should go back to what worked for, 100, 150 years. Yes, raise the standard to 2/3, but make it harder to do. And you have to get on the floor and hold the floor and get other people to hold up the floor with you. And that then creates national attention to whatever the issue is that you're trying to bring up in your opinion. Rather than just making it easy to keep one issue, set aside, so to speak, because you don't have to work for it, which is what we have now.
Yep. In high school civics, when you talked about a filibuster, they were reading from the telephone book and that type of thing. Now it's sort of, they kind of cheat.
Well, that's it goes back, like I said, to the early 1970s. Your former Senator Larry Byrd from West Virginia, I'm sure you go back long enough to remember him.
Yep.
He was a master of Senate rules, and he was essentially the architect of that.
Yeah.
And, again, they claimed it made it easier to get other business transacted in the meantime. But, then that just makes it easy to keep one issue permanently set aside is what it does.
Yeah.
Rather than having to fight it out. And, that's what they should do. Just fight it out, get it done one way or another, and then move on.
South Carolina Republican Party Chairman Drew McKissick is my guest. Last week, the South Carolina House, I think it was the subcommittee of the House Judiciary Committee, had a new primary bill before them. You and I have talked about this a number of times because there's several different versions out there, but they adjourned the meeting and still no action on that bill. Is this issue dead for this session?
I hate to say so, and that's probably just more because I just hate to admit what's probably true. It's dead for this session in the sense that there's no way, in my opinion, that you're actually going to get it through the House and through the Senate and signed by the governor by the end of this session. You'd be doing extremely well to get it through one body at this point because they delayed too long rather than getting started at the front of the session like we hoped that they would.
Mm-hmm.
But the State Executive Committee, as you and I talked about before back in December, voted to file a lawsuit. If the legislature doesn't get it done in this session, the South Carolina Republican Party will be filing a federal lawsuit against the state of South Carolina on this issue. This goes back to, as we've discussed before, freedom of association. Individuals and organizations and political parties have the right to freely associate with other like-minded people. So why is it when we go to do the most important thing that we can do, which is choose candidates to represent us on the ballot, should we be forced to associate with people who don't necessarily agree with us, which is the situation we have here in South Carolina now.
Yep.
Like I've said before, it's like, Carolina or Clemson fans choosing which players the other team is going to put on the field whenever they play one another every year.
Yep.
It's unfair. And that's where we are. And again, I think we're just going to have to resort to filing a lawsuit, unfortunately.
I think I have an idea of how we might get it through. Maybe we should ask Scout Motors to tell them that they would like closed primaries. You think?
You might be onto something there, Joey.
Things are going to get busy here in just a week or so away. Filing opens on what, the 16th?
Yep, March 16th through March 30th. So if you're interested in running for office, here's your chance. Once filing is closed, the state parties take care of candidate certifications to the ballot, and we begin to see what we have and do the prioritization that we need to do for the fall to make sure that whoever wins the nomination in these different districts and races, get the kind of help they're going to need to make sure the Republicans win in November.
Yep. Drew McKissick, chairman of the South Carolina Republican Party. Always a pleasure. We'll check back with you.
Yes, sir. Thank you now.
Have a good one.
That's it for today's edition of Just the Truth. Thanks for joining me in the PhD Weight Loss Studios. To lose weight for the last time, visit myphdweightloss.com. If you haven't joined my mailing list yet, visit my website, joeyhudson.com. Click on the Connect with Joey button so that you can receive our emails and the most up-to-date news. Also, join me on my YouTube channel. Be sure and like, comment, and subscribe. Just search for Joey Hudson. As always, thanks for spending a few minutes of your day with me. Do me a favor and forward this episode to a few friends. Just click on the share button and send to your contacts. We need to build an army of conservatives to win our country back, and we can do that by continuing to share the truth with our friends and family. Keep those comments coming via the Furman Ford text line, 864-477-JOEY. Email to joey@joeyhudson.com, and I love your messages on the MyPillow message line. Again, that's 864-477-JOEY, 864-477-5639. Be sure and take advantage of the MyPillow special, just $14.88 on the standard MyPillows when you use promo code Joey. Order online at mypillow.com or call 800-893-4053. We're back again tomorrow and hope you'll plan to join us. Until then, remember, God's got this. He's still in control.